There's a word found in the gospel as recorded by St. Matthew, the 6th chapter and the 10th verse. This is what it says. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I want to say a word this morning about kingdom work. Kingdom work. After 40 days of being tempted in the wilderness, Jesus begins his public ministry. He goes up into a mountain. Is followed by a multitude of people. He sits down, and it's significant that he sat down, because unlike I'm doing today, in those days, whenever the rabbi sat down, and many had something important to say, Jesus sat down and began to preach to them what we call the Sermon on the Mount. He talked to them about the Beatitudes, those virtues that lead to blessings in life. He said to his disciples, you are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. He said to them, when you do good for people, you don't have to go around bragging about it. For God, who sees in private, will reward you openly. And then he begins to teach them how to pray. He says to them, don't be like the Pharisees who give these long prayers and repeat themselves trying to impress people. Don't be like that. But when you pray, go in your closet, shut the door. And then he gives them this model prayer. And in this model prayer, which we call the Lord's Prayer, prayer which everybody knows, in this Lord's Prayer, he lifts up some words which are particularly important. They are important, but very few of us even realize or pay attention to the fact that they are there. Listen to what Jesus says. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. These words found in the Lord's Prayer is what has molded and shaped and defined my ministry. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth. I lift up this text today as we prepare for this week's election. Because these words of Jesus are so relevant and prayerfully meaningful for the days and the times in which we live. October 20th, 2 weeks ago, I preached at St. Joseph AME Church in Durham, North Carolina. It was their Souls to the Polls Sunday. And at the service, there were a number of reporters, one of them from the Washington Post. And I was surprised on yesterday. Somebody called me and said, Bishop, said, that's an interesting story in the Washington Post today. I said, interesting, why? Because you in it. And I said, what did I say this time? Said what the story was about is that you were talking about how important the black church is to our people. And nothing for the advancement of blacks in this country has occurred without the leadership and participation of the black church. And you were encouraging the black church to provide leadership for our people to get out and vote. And the story said that there were some blacks and some evangelicals who disagreed with what you said because they feel the black church has become too political and has strayed from its purpose, its mission, that the black church ought to be concerned with saving souls and with missions and ought not be involved in what's going on politically. And that in fact, the political parties could no longer depend on the black church to deliver votes. Because of the change in the black church, many black churches have declined in the size of their congregations and have become irrelevant. And I said, is that right? And I referred back to this text, to Jesus' prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Our brothers and sisters, this is going to be an interesting week. It will say an awful lot about this country in terms of how this election turns out. There is so much at stake in this election. This is the most important election in my lifetime. I believe the most important election since the election of Franklin Roosevelt during the Great Depression. It's an important election. It will say a lot about what kind of country we are, what our priorities are, what our values are. Well, you see, my brothers and my sisters, the reality of the fact is this nation is in trouble. Before I left Georgia, we held the Atlanta, North Georgia conference, and the Committee on the State of the Country came and gave its report, and it was 5 pages long. And after they gave the first paragraph, I stopped them. I said, you don't need all this to tell us the state of the country. You can summarize it in 4 words. It's in a mess. That will summarize it. Well, you see, my brothers and my sisters, we have a choice to make. Either we're going to go forward or we're going to go backward. And the interesting thing is, when I preached in Durham, there's this passage in John's gospel about a man who was born blind. And Jesus gave the man his sight. And what was interesting about the text is nobody cared about the man when he was blind and begging. But they got upset when he got his sight. And the Pharisees asked, "Who did this to you?" As if something bad had happened to him. You see, my brothers and sisters, the reason some people have problems with the church does to our people like Jesus did to the blind man. He opens our eyes so we can see. Some people don't want us to see. They don't want us to see what MAGA really means. MAGA really means that this country was great when there were no civil rights, no voting rights, no equal opportunity. That means this country was great when we stayed in our place. They don't want us to see. They don't want us to see what Project 2025 is really all about. 2025, it says its goals is no longer teach about black history. It'll be outlawed. You see, we got to help our people to understand why it is they don't want to have black history taught. Up until 1860, the United States was one of the poorest nations in the world. Today, we are the wealthiest nation in the world. That's because for over 100 years, black folk picked cotton, worked the ground. We produced the labor and never got paid for it. So they don't want us to see. And brothers, let me tell you, it's not just an issue for blacks. I want our women to understand it's also an issue for you. You see, too many of us really don't take a look at what's really being said. Don't you remember what the orange man said? He said, don't believe what you see. Believe what I say. And so I want white women to understand. We have to understand what is it that conservatives really want to conserve. They want to conserve a time when women stayed in their place. This argument about reproductive rights is not just about abortion. It's about women stay in your place. For the longest time, I could never understand what they meant by the angry white male. What were they mad about? They were running everything. Now these women want to get paid the same as men. They not for that. Then they got all this problem with the immigrants. And you know, I must admit, and y'all forgive me, it just means y'all are not praying enough for me because I keep saying stuff that I shouldn't say, but I say it because I don't understand it. I mean, I'm confused. I mean, I heard the former president complaining about Kamala Harris, talking about she turned black. I don't understand why he's upset. He turned orange. And then he turned around and said, all these immigrants coming across the southern border, listen to what they said. They're felons and rapists. Again, I don't understand what he's upset about. He's a convicted felon and rapist. I'm just confused. I'm trying to figure this thing out. And so after I got the call yesterday, I went and looked up on my MacBook the article in the Washington Post, and it got to criticizing the black church, saying that we ought not be involved in politics and getting people to vote and all that. And my mind went back 2018. I was chairman of the Social Action Commission for the AME Church, and we held a rally in Washington in Lafayette Park entitled Call to Conscience. And after the rally, we had a meeting, Congressman Hoyer on Capitol Hill with some of the congressional leadership. And as I was preparing to go into the meeting, a reporter from the New York Times gave me a copy of a petition signed by 10,000 evangelical pastors. And this is what the petition said. The petition said, any preaching or teaching about social justice is an injustice to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I said, that is so biblically and theologically unsound. Listen to what the word, he has shown thee, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. God is a God of justice. And so, my brothers and my sisters, as we prepare for this week, the challenge is upon us. Jesus said, your kingdom come. Your will be done. My brothers and sisters, the mission of the church is kingdom work. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The mission of the church is to bring about God's kingdom on earth. Now, there are those who say that's unrealistic. It will not happen in our lifetime. But that's not the issue. That's the challenge God has given us. We are God's servants in the world. Our challenge is to work on God's kingdom. Our brothers and sisters, there is a reason why so many of our congregations are in decline. There is a reason. I remind people the greatest period of growth in the history of the black church was when the church was more socially active. I remember during the 1970s and 80s, you couldn't get a seat in a black church because the church was engaged. We were about kingdom work. The leadership of the civil rights movement came out of the black church. The leadership came from the black pulpit. The foot soldiers were those who came and were in our pews. Unfortunately, over the last 30 or 40 years, we have in many ways changed and turned back from the church of our mothers and our fathers. We have become more caught up in worship, but not service. God calls us not only to worship him, but to serve him. And Ebenezer, let me remind you, God has a word of indictment for the church for our failure to serve him. Listen to what God says through the prophet Amos, 5th chapter, 21, 24. Listen to what God says. I hate, I despise your feast days. I have no regard for your solemn assemblies. Though you offer me grain offerings and burnt offerings, I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your choirs and the melody of your stringed instruments. But let justice run down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. We are to be engaged in kingdom work. And so, my brothers and sisters, in 7 minutes, let me lift up 3 things we must do if we're going to fulfill God's mission for his church, if we're going to usher in God's kingdom on earth. Let me lift up 3 things in 7 minutes. Now, if it seemed like more than 7 minutes, just means your watch is fast. But 3 things. My brothers and sisters, the first thing we must do is understand that God has not in the past, he is not today, and he will not in the future do for us what we can do for ourselves. Too many of us want God to do everything for us. Understand, God has blessed us and equipped us to do some things for ourselves. You wonder why we pray for some stuff and it doesn't happen? God not gonna do for you what you can do for yourself. Read the book of Exodus. God brought them out of Egypt. Then here you come, Pharaoh and his army coming after them. And the people of Israel went to crying, carrying on. And God said to Moses, why are you crying unto me? What's in your hand? Use what I put in your hand. My brother, my sisters, I just want you to know, as we prepare for this week's election, God has given us what we need for our deliverance. What's in your hand? When I went to Georgia in 2016, the first meeting I had, with the ministers in Georgia, I was hot. I mean, I was livid. And I told them I was angry. I said, I'm angry. I said, I'm not angry with the white folk, I'm angry with us. Because in the 2016 election, the other man won Georgia by 4.5 percentage points. But only 52% of blacks turned out to vote. If only 60% turned out, he wouldn't have won Georgia. And I promised them that we were not going to have a replay of this in the future. And so we organized, we worked, we deliberated, we educated our folk, we mobilized our folk, we organized our folk. And in the 2020 election, they didn't think we had a chance. But all I know is when black folk turned out to vote, they changed the resident of the White House. They changed control of the Senate. My brothers and my sisters, use what you got. Your vote is in your hands. Use what you got. Now, I remind folk all over this country, the United States is indebted to black folk in Georgia. Oh, yes, we are. Black folk turned out, put the orange man out of the White House, changed Mitch McConnell from majority leader. If it wasn't for black folk in Georgia, Ketanji Brown Jackson wouldn't be on the United States Supreme Court. You gotta use what you got. If blacks turn out, we will determine the outcome in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Georgia, in North Carolina. If black folk turn out, the descendants of those who built the Capitol and the White House will determine the leadership of this nation. Use what you got. Second, my brothers and my sisters, the second thing this text tells us is that we've got to be engaged in kingdom work. Listen to what Jesus prayed. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth. You know, sometimes I get tickled, and sometimes I get frustrated because so many of us just take out of context this notion about the kingdom. I want to go to heaven. Ain't none of us rushing to get there. Acting like you want to go today. And what's most frustrating about it is we want to go to heaven, but don't want to live a blessed life on earth. I'm like King David. I would have been frustrated if I had failed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And some of us talking about, I don't want to go to hell. That ain't all salvation is about. In fact, you got it all wrong. Salvation is not about getting us or keeping us out of hell. It's about getting hell out of us. And so we've got to be engaged in kingdom work. Because my brothers and sisters, those of you who have not voted already, I trust you will remember. You get the kind of leadership that you elect. You get the kind of leadership that you elect. And this election, we got a stark choice. We're either going to live in light or we're going to live in darkness. One of the candidates is totally about darkness. One of the candidates can't govern unless he polarizes and divides the nation. One candidate's made it clear he's after retribution. One candidate has made it clear that he's not about democracy. He's not about equality. Darkness. But I would remind you, Jesus prayed for the kingdom to come. My brothers and sisters, we have some folk this week who are going to be working their tails off to see that the kingdom doesn't come. I've had pastors come say to me, Bishop, my problem is all my folk not working. I say, that's not true. All your folk working. Them not working for you, working against you, but they all working. In the Congress, everybody not working for us, some working against us. And so, my brothers and sisters, again, look at what Jesus does, Kev. He prays, your kingdom come. But he didn't just talk about it. He worked for it. He didn't spend all of his time in the temple. Spent most of his time out in the street where the people were. My brothers and sisters, if we're going to bring God's kingdom on earth, we got to do more than talk about it. We got to work for it. We need to remember the words of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass said, I prayed for over 20 years, but nothing happened until my legs started walking. My brothers and sisters, this week, get up, get out, vote. Stand on your legs and vote. And then finally, as I go to my seat, my watch stopped. As I go to my seat, let me simply caution us. We can't do this by ourselves. And I think it is absolutely profound that Jesus uttered these words as he prayed. In the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth. He prayed for it. He worked for it. He prayed for it because he knew that you and I can't do this by ourselves. So Jesus asked for some help. Do you understand that's what prayer is? Prayer is asking God for help. Prayer is asking for divine intervention. Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know, my brothers and sisters, we need some help. You've got crazy folk like Elon Musk pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the effort to turn back time. We need some help. We can't do this by ourselves. And too many of us have become discouraged. Too many of us have become despondent. 4 months ago, I was distraught. The Pew Research Center did a poll. In the poll, they asked this question: what emotion best describes your state of mind in the times in which we live? In the poll, 53% of the people responded and said fear was the emotion that best described their state of mind. Fear. Being afraid, being anxious, uncertain. Some with that state of mind are sitting in this congregation this morning, afraid. You ought to ask God for some help. As I prepare to go to my seat, my brothers and my sisters, if we do our part, God will do his part. A few years ago, a tour was being given at the London Gallery of Art. A tour guide was taking the tourists through, and there were a collection of paintings which were hanging on the wall. The tour guide told them who the painter was and what the painting was about. Went to the next one, told them who the painter was, what the painting was about. Got to the next one, who the painter was, what the painting was about. Came to the picture on the corner. She told them who the painter was. The name of the painting was entitled Checkmate. Satan played a game of chess against the king, and Satan won and declared checkmate. They got around the corner. She was just getting ready to describe the next painting when she heard all this commotion back around the corner. Heard somebody crying out, "It's a lie, it's a lie." Everybody ran back around the corner to see what all the commotion was about. Saw one man standing there, looking up at that painting and saying, "It's a lie." They didn't know that in the group taking the tour was Gary Kasparov, the international chess champion. He looked up at that painting and said, "It's a lie, for the king has another move." My brothers and my sisters, as we prepare to go into this election, there are some people who have already declared checkmate, and they believe that is over. But I just want to tell you, it's a lie, for the king has another move. God still has the last word.